So tonight I'm talking about the astrology of relationships. I want to talk about what makes a relationship serious, what you can often see in serious partnerships, marriage partnerships, long-term committed partnerships. I also want to talk about the astrology of attraction, what attracts two people, and that can be quite different from what keeps two people together. Also, I want to talk about what brings compatibility in a partnership, and also what makes things not so compatible in a partnership. What can cause tension and strife, what causes a lot of fighting. So first of all, the astrology of serious relationships and marriage. Now, when you are looking at a serious relationship or a marriage partnership, you're often going to see Saturn involved. Now, I'm going to use some terminology that might be a little hard. If you're not really familiar with astrology and you don't understand aspects and house overlays and things like that, this might be a little bit hard for you to grasp, but it's still worth keeping note of because this is important information. So, once you put all the other pieces together, this will be some good information for you. But Saturn is always parity. Saturn is very often involved in serious partnerships. So what you'll often see is Saturn in aspect to, personal planets. So Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, you'll see Saturn in aspect to those. Now what Saturn does is, first of all, Saturn is a planet that brings discipline and commitment. It makes things serious. Saturn can also be kind of heavy, like a heavy influence, burdensome, but if it's in positive aspect, it can be a lot easier, and especially when you see Saturn in aspect to Venus. That's definitely a huge indicator of a serious relationship, because a Saturn person is going to, so Saturn in aspect to another person's Venus, I hope I made that clear. But Saturn in aspect to another person's Venus is going to make the Saturn person feel very driven to have a serious commitment to the Venus person. They're going to want to commit to them, they're going to want to make things solid. Venus might play out, the energy of Venus might play out as being a little bit more, no, it's not a jokey page. Saturn in aspect to Venus. Venus might be a little bit more flighty than Saturn, but Venus is the planet of love and relationships. So Saturn in aspect to another person's Venus, usually easy aspect. That's going to be what's most conducive to a positive interaction. That's going to be a huge indicator of a possible serious relationship. Also Saturn in easy aspect to any of the other planets, but Venus is important. Also, if one person's Saturn is an aspect to the other person's 7th house ruler, because that can act like, this person's 7th house ruler can act like Venus in their chart, because it's ruling the area of life, the 7th house, which involves relationships. So say your descendant, your 7th house, is in Cancer, your moon would be your 7th house ruler. So someone's Saturn in aspect to your moon could indicate a serious relationship. So that's going to be important. Saturn is going to play a huge part in this. Also, Saturn in aspect, easy aspect especially, Saturn in aspect to another person's ascendant or descendant, because the descendant is the beginning of the 7th house, which again is the area of life that the house that rules partnerships and marriages and things of that nature. So Saturn aspecting someone's ascendant, descendant, if it aspects one of those, it's going to aspect both. So if it's aspecting one of those, that's also a potential indicator of a serious relationship. Yes, I am going to talk about Neptune, actually. Another asteroid. Now this is a little bit iffy. It's not really something. It's not iffy. Juno is an asteroid that does come into play often in serious partnerships. Juno is like the good wife asteroid. Does often indicate serious partnerships when Juno is involved in this industry as well. Now, something that I've seen happen a lot in the synastry chart between two people who end up being in a long-term marriage, this is something that happens a lot, is one person's moon conjunct the other person's ascendant, or in their first house. So when one person's moon is conjunct the other person's ascendant, that is going to be a powerful emotional connection. There's going to be a lot of emotional understanding, a lot of emotional compatibility, and you're going to bring out the feels in each other. The moon is the most personal part of you. It is your heart. So when your moon is involved in the synastry, and the moon is in the other person's first house, it's like everything about that person. The first house is, the self. So everything about that person, the way they present themselves, the way they look, it's all in perfect correspondence with your heart. Yes, I would say that's positive, Isabel. Especially if they're in aspect to each other, or really close together, in conjunction. So, sorry, what was I saying? Yeah, the moon in the first house, that's going to be a powerful indicator of the potential for a very, very good emotional understanding, and something that is going to bring out a lot of feelings. Really powerful feelings. Not the kind of feelings that you would get with, say, Venus, which can be just kind of lighthearted, flirtatious, really enjoying each other's appearance. The moon is going to be just a lot deeper than that. Like I said, the moon is your heart. So when the moon gets involved and it aspects someone's ascendant, and that can be any aspect. It could be, the trine or sextile. I don't know that I would say hard aspects are going to be the same, but the conjunction especially, you often see, a husband's moon in his wife's first house or vice versa. So that's another powerful indication of a serious relationship in synastry. Now, sun-moon connections. Now this is a fated partnership usually. When you see one person's sun in aspect to another person's moon, especially an easy aspect or by conjunction, that is another powerful aspect. The sun is, masculine, and the moon is feminine, the mother and father of the zodiac, or the mother and father of the sky. So when you have one person's sun conjunct the other person's moon, that indicates a lot of emotional support. The moon person is going to be really supportive of the sun person's expression in the world. And, the sun person is going to just be kind of a light and really impact the moon person in a really positive way, bring this just sense of shine and vibrance to their emotional nature. It's just a really, really powerful karmic fated connection when you have sun conjunct moon, sun sextile moon, sun trine moon, sun square moon, sun opposite moon, the hard aspects. Those, I think, would still be fated connections, but they're going to be a lot more difficult. You're going to have some things to work out. I would definitely say sun conjunct moon, though. That is powerful for sure. Now I'll talk a little bit about midpoints, and I don't want to get too complicated with this, but the midpoint between, okay, so your midpoints are, say, for instance, your sun is my sun is at 15 degrees Aries, say, and my Mercury is at 29 degrees Aries. My Sun-Mercury midpoint is going to fall somewhere, like, right between, in the halfway point between my Sun and my Mercury, so somewhere around 23 something, yes, 23 degrees Aries or something like that. My Sun-Mercury midpoint would be there. So, your Sun-Moon midpoint is a powerful spot in your chart, and someone who puts a planet on your Sun-Moon midpoint, that is a very powerful place for someone to put a planet, especially if it is, a personal planet, Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars. They're going to really bring, they're gonna hit you in the feels pretty hard, because this is the point of marriage. Again, the Sun is, masculine, the Moon is feminine. this is sort of the point of marriage. This person is going to really bring out some powerful feelings in you, and this is another indication of a serious relationship, a relationship that is going somewhere. So say, your sun, moon, midpoint is at 23 degrees Aries. Someone putting their sun, moon, Mercury, Venus, or Mars at 23 degrees Aries is really going to bring something out in you, for sure. That is just a powerful point in your chart for a serious relationship. Now, the 7th house. The 7th house is important, I think. I wouldn't say that this is always going to be an indicator of a long-term relationship at all, actually. Because, it can be, because the 7th house is the house of partnership, it is the house of marriage. However, a lot of people are going to put something in your 7th house. So, there will be some attraction. When somebody puts something in your 7th house, they can come off to you as your ideal partner, which obviously would make you desire to have a partnership with them, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to pan out that way. I would think you have to have some other important things in synastry, Saturn aspects, other fated connections, things of that nature, in order to, give the relationship longevity. But the 7th house is a powerful place for someone to put a planet that would make you desire to have that partnership with them. I'm talking about relationships right now, but I don't really feel comfortable saying my favorite and least favorite sign. Of course I have them, everybody has them, but I don't want to offend anybody, so I'm just going to pretend that I don't. Moon quintile ascendant, I would say that can definitely be a positive connection, but I wouldn't say it's powerful enough to really give the relationship that same kind of emotional compatibility. Again, the quintile is a lot of astrologers don't even count the quintile. I do count it, but I just don't consider it a hugely powerful aspect. It would definitely be a positive thing. It can't hurt, but I don't think it's going to give you that longevity that you want. Yes, I am, Jen. Okay, so 7th house, definitely going to give you some, the desire to partner up with that person, but not necessarily give you longevity. Now, fated connections, those are really important, and they often indicate a long-term relationship, even if that long-term relationship doesn't last, it'll teach you something. And because it teaches you something, these fated connections, you are drawn to them. That's the reason that you're drawn to them, is because it's fated. You need to learn something from that person. Okay, so anyway, fated connections would be connections between, well, first of all, sun, moon, that's a fated connection. Moon Chiron is another fated connection. Aspects from Saturn are usually pretty fated, because Saturn is a karmic planet. Also, aspects to the North Node, South Node axis, and the vertex. You can find all of this information at astro.com. You can find out where North Node, South Node, and your vertex are. But these are all fated points. The North Node, South Node speaks to where you are going in life. The North Node is where you are going, that's your life's purpose. And your South Node is where you've been, what you're already comfortable with. If you believe in past lives, which I personally do, the South Node would speak to your past lives. So often, who aspects your North Node, South Node. This is Alright, am I back? You guys see me? I had some problems with my connection. Let me know if you can see this and you can hear me. Aspects to North Node, South Node, when you see that in synastry, especially hard aspects, this is somebody that you have known before. There's often a moment of instant familiarity with that person. Squares and conjunctions are especially potent. When someone puts something on your South Node, conjunct your South Node, this is somebody that you have instant familiarity with, because the way they express themselves, the way they express the energy of that particular planet is going to just feel like home to you, because again, the South Node is where you're coming from. This is what you've mastered, what you're comfortable with. So when someone puts something on your South Node, there's just this instant familiarity. However, the South Node is not your life's purpose. So there can be a bit of a feeling with conjunctions to the South Node that you're not really growing with that person, that they're kind of holding you back from your growth. Or I don't want to say holding you back. It depends on a lot of other things, but there can be a feeling of not really growing with conjunctions to the South Node, or that person is not helping you grow. So with conjunctions to the North Node, this is a feeling of there being a purpose to the relationship. They are teaching you something. Or, you know, squares between the North and South Node, it could be that that you have known them before and they still have something to teach you. You have unfinished business that needs to be taken care of. So the North Node is a point of, you know, that's where you're going in life, that's your life's purpose. So when you have something, or someone puts a planet in aspect to your North Node, you are really going to feel like there's a purpose to that relationship. And it might not be marriage, but often people do end up with, you know, married to people who activate that North Node, South Node axis, because there's such a pull with these fated connections. There's just this intense pull with them, because you instinctively know that they have something to teach you, that you need to be involved in this relationship for some reason. So the North Node, South Node axis is huge. That is very, very huge. I think North Node is going to be especially important because that's where you're growing, that's what you're moving towards. But there's also the vertex. Now, this is something you can, an extra selection on astro.com. This is a fated point in your chart, and people who put something on your vertex, that is also an indicator of a fated connection. With these fated relationships, you can just really feel, really feel that it is meant to be. And I think that it usually is meant to be. That doesn't mean it's not meant to be forever, but it is meant to be. You are supposed to know this person. You are supposed to learn something from this person. It's a very, very important thing to have that pull, because that North Node, South Node, that vertex, those really fated points, that's going to provide a real pull to be with that person. And another important thing. Now, again, I don't want to get too involved in this, but the composite chart of a relationship, that is what you have when you take the midpoints between, okay, so I don't know if I'm explaining this very well. It's when you combine two people's charts, and the way you would do this is by taking the midpoint between one person's sun, the other person's sun, one person's moon, the other person's moon, one person's Mercury, the other person's Mercury, and so on and so on. And all of the composite planets would be at the midpoint. So the midpoint between one person's Venus and the other person's Venus would be the composite Venus. Now the composite chart is going to tell you a lot about the fate, the ultimate fate of the relationship, as well as the way that that couple appears to the world. So a composite chart is, if you see these things in the composite chart, even if you don't, if you feel a real pull with somebody, or you're with somebody and you know that you're supposed to be with them, but you're not seeing those things in the synastry chart, look to the composite chart, because more than likely there are some fated things going on in that composite chart. Pluto in the 7th house of the composite chart is often powerful. You know, a full 7th house or 8th house, or aspects between, you know, those positive aspects that I mentioned already. Those are going to be really, really powerful. Now, Saturn is just going to be really, really important in serious relationships. That's one to remember. Actually, Kate, on my YouTube channel, I have videos that I'm putting up about Jupiter and Scorpio for the different ascendant signs, so I would check those out. Now for attraction. Now, there is a lot of things that go into this, and this is different than what can indicate a serious relationship, because with attraction in synastry, there doesn't really have to be a lot of understanding. You can be primarily attracted to someone and really just not have a lot in common with them. But there's like just the, okay, I'm going to talk about the intense pull that you feel with somebody. That's what I mean when I talk about attraction. Oh, Saturn, Pluto, that could be difficult. I can get more into that later. So, for attraction, the main thing you want to look at when you're looking at attraction is going to be aspects of Venus and Mars. Venus is love, beauty, pleasure, sensuality, and traditionally it is what we find beautiful and pleasing in a partner. It is what we desire. It is our values. That is what we are looking for in a relationship and how we express ourselves in a relationship. So Venus is going to be very, very important for attraction. Mars is going to be important for attraction, whereas Venus is very sensual. Venus is loving and beautiful, can be a bit lighthearted. Mars is pure sex. Mars is masculine energy, pure sex. It is how you go about getting what you want, and it is what you are like sexually, and what you prefer in a partner sexually, what attracts you to a partner sexually. So these are the two planets, these are the major planetary players as far as attraction in synastry. Yeah, Mars square Pluto, I will get to that. So when you have one person's Sun conjunct another person's Venus, or you know, trine the other person's Venus, what happens when you cross up Pisces with an Aries? A fish ram. That's what happens. So Sun Venus, the Sun person is going to be expressing the traits of the other person's Venus sign in a very vibrant, creative, expressive kind of way. That's what the person's ego is, and Venus can really find the Sun person attractive for that reason. Caitlin, I know what you're doing. Just stop. That's my sister. She's trying to mess with me. Sun Venus is going to be an aspect that indicates some attraction. The conjunction especially, that's going to be powerful for attraction. But even the hard aspects can indicate a lot of attraction between two people. So like Venus square Sun, there's going to be some stuff going on there. Like, there can be a kind of like being overly catering to the other person with Sun square opposite Venus, like just how do I say that? Just like being a really like catering to that person in an over the top way. Like pandering to them. It can be kind of a pandering aspect with hard aspects from Sun to Venus. Because the square is an aspect of tension and action, so with Venus, that can be kind of like over the top. Yes, if you have that in your chart, definitely. It would probably make you more attracted to Aries types or Martian types. So, Sun Venus, that's one that's not quite so sexual. That's just more of a really, yeah, excessive care. That's a good way to describe that. Sun Venus is not going to be so sexual. It's just going to be like, you know, really being pleased by each other, really liking to be around each other, finding each other beautiful. Sun Mars, these are both quote-unquote masculine planets. So Sun Mars is going to be, that's going to be a more of a sexual attraction, probably a very active kind of connection that you have with Sun and Mars, but the Sun person is expressing the traits that the Mars person prefers sexually. So in a very vibrant Sun kind of way. Then you have Sun Pluto. Now that is an intense aspect. So Sun Pluto, anything that involves Pluto can be an aspect of obsession, or you know, it can be kind of all-consuming. And it, like, this Pluto person will want to change the Sun person in some way. That can sound kind of bad, but what I mean by that is that Pluto is a planet of transformation. So when Pluto aspects someone else's Sun, Pluto's trying to transform whatever it touches. So when Pluto aspects someone's Sun, you're trying to kind of reshape that person. There can be kind of a drive to want to change that person or exert some kind of power and control over them. And then the Sun is an egotistical planet. So there can be real power struggles there. But anything involving Pluto can create some real magnetic attraction between two people. I would say that Pluto is another planet that governs attraction, but I don't know that I would say that's totally accurate. Venus and Mars would be more attraction, and Pluto would be more of a deeper connection. But regardless, it does produce attraction as a byproduct of what it's doing. So Sun Pluto, there can be some intense pull towards one another and wanting to transform one another. Now moon aspects can definitely indicate some attraction, but it would be more of an emotional kind of attraction. So like Moon Venus, that would indicate some sympathies between one another. There would be some understanding between the way one person, the moon, expresses themselves in an emotional way, and the way the other person expresses themselves in a loving way. So, you know, that would be Venus. So positive Moon-Venus connections can indicate a lot of compatibility in the way that you express your love, the way you express your emotions, and that in and of itself is attractive, but it's not really like this primal sexual attraction. I will get to Venus-Pluto. That is a very interesting one. Moon-Mars would be kind of like this intense. So the one person, the moon, that's your emotional nature, and then Mars is sexuality. So there would be kind of like this emotional sexual connection that goes on between the two people. Like, it's involving both of those things. And I mean, that can be even more attractive than some other kinds of aspects. Like, you know, Venus can be a little more lighthearted and shallow, but when you're involving your moon, you're involving your emotions, you're involving your heart. So that can be a really magnetic attraction just because it's involving you in the feels. So Moon Mars, that's another aspect that can indicate some attraction. And finally, we get to Venus Mars. You're talking about the two planets that most often are involved when it comes to any kind of attraction, being an aspect to each other in synastry. So if one person's Venus is an aspect to another person's Mars, especially if it's like the conjunction, actually especially if it's the square or the opposition. Hey, can you guys see me? I'm not having a great time with my signal tonight. Actually, you know what? I think that my neighbors use my Wi-Fi, so I need to figure that out. Figure out how to kick them off, because that irritates me. But anyway, so Venus and Mars together, these are the two planets that pretty much govern by themselves attraction. So Venus and Mars together, that is a really powerful indication of attraction between two people, especially any kind of hard aspects. Venus conjunct, Venus square, Venus opposite. My connection is not very good right now, so I'm gonna keep on keeping on, but I'm gonna have to figure out what's going on with my Wi-Fi connection. Yeah, I might have to do that. I'm just gonna change my password or something, call the internet company, see what's going on, because it's been kind of bad for a while. But yes, Venus-Mars, it's going to generate some intense attraction, I think. You're talking about the planet of love and sensuality, beauty, and the planet of pure sex, just doing their thing together, and that can indicate some intense sexual attraction, some intense, butterfly feelings, really being motivated. Mars is like motivation, so that can bring a real motivation to make things work for that person, to have sex with that person. It's just a powerful sexual attraction that can happen there. It can be a little bit more shallow. Venus-Mars aspects tend to be an aspect that causes people to be intensely attracted to each other and want to make something happen with that person, and then it's like a quick crash and burn kind of thing. Like, it can fizzle out very quickly because of the intensity that there is when you first go into it. It's not like a slow, steady burn. It just like Romeo and Juliet style, coming together and falling apart kind of thing. Mars, anything involving Mars can be very impulsive. So then you have Venus-Pluto. What do we have here? I have it down here. So, Venus-Pluto. Now this is an aspect that will definitely... No, I don't... I don't want to say it will definitely... Sorry. I don't want to say it will definitely generate attraction. Within the context of a relationship, it will play out a certain way. But what I want to make clear about Venus-Pluto is that often, for instance, I have a Venus-Pluto aspect in my chart. I have Venus opposite Pluto. So what happens with me is that my Venus, excuse me, my Venus opposes everyone's Pluto who is in my generation within a few years of me. Anyone who's like around my age. And those are the people you tend to date, especially when you're younger. Anyone in my generation, my Venus is going to oppose their Pluto. So it's not necessarily that if I meet somebody, what is going on here? If my Venus aspects someone's Pluto, that doesn't necessarily mean anything, because, at least for me, because I have that with so many people in my generation. Pluto moves very slowly, so everybody within the few years of each other, born within a few years of each other, is going to have Pluto in about the same position, within a few degrees. So, at least for the Venus person, because Venus moves so much more quickly, everybody else in their age range is going to be Pluto in that dynamic. And so they're kind of used to that energy. Plus they have a natal Venus-Pluto in their chart anyway, so that the energy is just more familiar to them and it's not such a novelty. But for the Pluto person, the Venus person can be a bit of a novelty and therefore be very drawn to them. And especially because it's Pluto. Pluto is the planet of, obsession and transformation and intensity, soul bonding and all this kind of thing. So Pluto can be a bit obsessive over Venus, but then Pluto is also very prideful. I don't know what I would say is the best. I think it depends on your own natal chart and what you prefer. What your own natal chart predisposes you to, what kind of energies you like. But yeah, Venus-Pluto can play out in the way that Venus and Pluto can be very drawn to each other. So Venus would really find Pluto fascinating in a dark and sexy, powerful god of the underworld kind of way. And then Pluto would be like want to possess Venus, because that's what Pluto does. Pluto wants to possess, Pluto wants to transform, Pluto wants to control. So Pluto would probably want to possess Venus and feel very possessive over them, but because it's Pluto and Pluto's prideful, Pluto is powerful, Pluto doesn't want to put it all out there emotionally, they can play games with Venus, and there can be a bit of a push-pull that goes on there, especially with the hard aspects, but there's also a real intensity that comes with this that can be very appealing, very attractive, especially to people who like that kind of energy and aren't turned off by the intensity of it. People who can handle the intensity of Pluto can be very drawn to Venus-Pluto partnerships. In any case, this can be a highly attractive aspect in synastry, especially, and I think a lot of people will disagree with me, but this just makes the most sense to me, especially for Pluto, because Venus is a novelty to them. But Pluto is not necessarily a novelty to Venus. And this is the rule if you are dating within your age range. It might be different if you are the Venus person, you know, you don't have a natal Venus-Pluto aspect and you're dating outside of your age range. But yeah, anyway, in any case, Venus-Pluto can be very obsessive. It can be a highly... it can be very much to do with power struggles and game playing within that relationship, because Pluto wants to keep that control, and they will play games to make sure that they keep it, especially if it's an unevolved Pluto person. Now, here's one that is just pure sexiness and can generate a lot of attraction, but can also be highly volatile, and that would be Mars-Pluto. Mars-Pluto aspects in synastry. What this is going to do is you're looking at Mars, which is just all about sex, the physical act of sex, and highly willful, highly impulsive planet, the natural ruler of Aries, and then Pluto, which is, you know, again, powerful, prideful, god of the underworld, wants to transform, wants to control. And so what you have here is two highly powerful planets. They are both highly powerful planets, both sexual, but in sort of different ways. Mars is kind of more about the physical act of sex, and then Pluto is more about the soul bonding and the merging that can come with sex. It's a bit of a deeper connection with sex when it comes to Pluto. So, but what you have are two very, very powerful planets, and Pluto is the modern ruler of Scorpio too. So you're dealing with two very, very powerful planets, and when these come into contact, there can be a lot of heat, a lot of passion, a very intense sexual draw between these two people, and it is specifically sexual because these are just very, very sexual. It's just a sexual connection. This is what it's known for. In hard aspect, this can indicate some intense power struggles, but it's not going to come without heat. It's not going to be boring. It might be painful. It might be scary. Sometimes people say that Mars-Pluto in hard aspect is a very dangerous aspect even. It can indicate abuse, but I would not go ahead and say that this is always going to indicate abuse if it's in hard aspect. No, because if you have two people who are evolved and they are consciously living and they are not predisposed to violence, that's not a fair statement to make. But you are dealing with very volatile energies, so it can be a wild ride when it comes to Mars-Pluto, especially by hard aspect. I think with like the sextile and the trine, you're still going to get a lot of that heat, but probably not so much of the volatility. I have read a lot of places that Mars-Pluto and hard aspect can indicate abuse, but again, I don't think that is a fair statement because it depends on the nature of the people involved in the relationship. Now, here's one Nessus is a dwarf planet, and it is often thought of as being the planet of abuse, but this can indicate some intense attraction. Nessus is a very willful planet, and it can also be fairly obsessive. So if you have like Nessus in aspect to Mars, Nessus in aspect to Venus, this can indicate some like obsessive attraction going on there, and perhaps a propensity for abuse or mistreatment. But again, this is another thing that is dictated by the nature of the people involved in the relationship. Now, when you have Neptune involved in aspects in synastry, that's going to indicate some attraction purely because Neptune sees what it wants to see. So the Neptune person can look at the planet person, you know, whether it's Mars, Venus, particularly Venus and Mars, sometimes other planets as well. But if you have Neptune and Neptune is looking at the planet person, they're going to see what they want to see in the planet person. They're going to be idealizing the planet person. There can be a really dreamy quality that's going on here. And yeah, I think Neptune is attractive in synastry simply because of that dreamy quality. You feel something very ethereal and magical about the relationship when you have Neptune in synastry. So that can definitely attract you, but I would not say that it is very good for longevity or making the relationship concrete in any way, because Neptune is the antithesis of making anything solid. Neptune breaks down boundaries. It permeates structures that exist between people. So it is not really conducive to a long-term relationship unless other things are at play, but definitely generates some attraction just because of that dreamy quality that can be happening with Neptune. Another thing that can generate some attraction is Venus or Mars conjunct the person's ascendant or in the person's first house. Because if Venus is in someone's first house or conjunct their ascendant especially, the Venus person is going to see the ascendant person as being their physical type, just looking very beautiful to them, they can look like the ideal of what that person would be looking for physically in a partner, because, you know, the ascendant is your physical body, it's the way you're presenting yourself, it is the self. So with Venus, one person's Venus in aspect to the other person's ascendant, especially by conjunction or in the first house, can definitely indicate, you know, there being some real pleasant Venusian, beautiful vibes going on, and Venus especially would find the ascendant person very attractive. And then a person's Mars in the first house, in the other person's first house, they would be very drawn to that person sexually, because again, Mars is just pure sexual energy. So, and Mars being in that person's first house or conjunct the ascendant person would be probably very sexually arousing to the Mars person. Just their physical body, the way they walk, it's all going to be very, it's going to be a turn on for the Mars person. The ascendant person is physically expressing what they desire sexually. So another very attractive aspect or layover between charts. Let me come back to that. My first thought was Neptune. Yeah, I'll come back to that question. I think that we can all do that, and I don't know that it does have much to do with astrology. I feel like it has to do with unhealed parts of yourself. But I'll come back to that in a little while. Another indicator of just straight up attraction in synastry is Venus or Mars in the 5th house, which is the house of pleasure. It's the house of, you know, romance, all of those things. And then Venus or Mars in the 8th house, which is the natural house of Scorpio, which is a very intimate and often sexual bond. The 8th house is a very, very intimate place. It is a place where it is the intimacy sector. It is the sex sector. It is the things that you share with other people. So with Venus, one person's Venus or Mars in the other person's 8th house, that can generate some real feelings of intimacy and sexual attraction, wanting to share yourself with that person. Those layovers can be attractive simply because the planet person can make you feel safe to do that. Especially if, Venus or Mars are positively aspected. And this goes for really anything in the 5th or the 8th house, but Venus and Mars are, the attraction and sexual planets. So those are going to be especially potent in the 5th and 8th houses. And again, of course, Venus or Mars conjunct the other person's descendant, the 7th house. That's very, very potent as well, because it shows that the planet person is what the 7th house descendant person is looking for in a partner. They're expressing the energies of that planet in the way that what that person is looking for in a partner. So someone's Venus on the other person's descendant can really generate some feelings of the way that person loves is highly attractive to you. The way they express their personal physical beauty, their personal style, it's all very attractive to you. There's something about the Venus person that makes you want to partner up. I don't know that by itself it would indicate being kinky. I think that depends on other factors. I think Uranus being involved can definitely indicate some kinkiness. It really depends on a variety of things, but it definitely can, but not on its own. Okay, now another indication of just that raw attraction is going to be the fated connections. That's something I mentioned when I talked about serious relationships, indicators of long-term serious relationships. But it is also something that is going to just draw you in and make you feel very attracted to that person, because it is like a magnetic pull. It's a fated relationship. You are meant to learn something from that person, and that in and of itself can be highly attractive. Yes, that would typically be an attractive layover. A lot of people are going to put their sun in your 8th house, so I wouldn't say by itself it's a good indicator of that. And I wouldn't say that North Node by itself would be an indicator of attraction if it fell in the 8th house at all, actually. It would really depend on aspects to the North Node. Sun, I think, in the other person's 8th house is more consistently an indicator of attraction. But again, just not by itself. Now, compatibility between two charts. Now, compatibility really just comes from having any two planets in positive aspect with each other. So Sun conjunct Sun, Sun sextile Sun, Sun trine Sun. The positive, those are going to, the positive aspects, the trine, the sextile, the conjunction, these are going to be indicators of compatibility. I wouldn't count hard aspects in compatibility at all, because you are looking at something that is just, you're looking at people coming at each other from, or the two planets involved coming at each other from two very, very different places. So I wouldn't count any kind of hard aspect for compatibility, unless there are some other factors involved. But any kind of easy aspect, but I've noticed like Moon, Mercury, Sun easy aspect Moon, Moon easy aspect Moon, Moon easy aspect Mercury, Moon easy aspect Venus, any like, if you have a lot of sextiles or trines with somebody, that is an indicator of compatibility. However, by itself, it might not be, if you have these factors by themselves, it's not necessarily going to be an indicator of being highly attracted to that person or vice versa. This is just nice to have. It's not really going to give you that magnetic pull necessarily, but it will provide it will provide compatibility. There won't be a lot of fighting where these planets are concerned. Man's moon conjunct woman's sun. I would say that that could generate a strong attraction. Again, none of these are going to be, you know, you would definitely be attracted to each other by itself. But yes, I do think that that is a pretty powerful, karmic link that you have with the moon conjunct sun. And if one person's Mars and the other person's Mars are in the same sign, especially conjunct one another, that can be pretty powerful for sexual attraction as well. So yeah, any kind of easy aspects. Moon, Mercury, Sun, Mercury, any kind of easy aspect to Mercury would be really good for communication. Depending on the planet involved with Mercury, would depend on the kind of, you know, ease of communication, what is going to come easily for you in communication. But yes, any kind of easy aspect to Mercury, and Mercury is going to be really important, especially in a long-term relationship, because you have to be able to communicate. So easy aspects to Mercury are going to be really important for compatibility, because without Mercury, you're not, if you have bad stuff going on with Mercury, you're not going to want to talk to that person. It can be very, very difficult. If you have like hard aspects to each other's Mercury, that can indicate a real imbalance, misunderstandings and stuff. So easy aspects to Mercury, that's going to be very, very important for communication, for compatibility. And then some difficulty in relationships. And these are things that are not necessarily attractive. Most of these are not really indicators of, I mean, you can be attracted to any of this. I mean, even the stuff that makes you crazy about the other person can make you also attracted to them. The differences can attract, but these are generally not even very sexual things that I'm about to talk about. So Sun hard aspect Sun, Sun square Sun, Sun opposite Sun, Sun in conjunct Sun, those are going to be very difficult aspects, because the way one person functions, where one person is directing their conscious will and how they're directing their conscious will, is in direct conflict with the way the other person expresses their conscious will, their ego. And there can be constant fighting. There can be some ego battles, especially with the Sun-Sun, Sun hard aspect Sun. There can be some ego conflicts going on there, because the Sun is the ego. So Sun hard aspect Sun indicates a real lack of understanding between those two people. Then you have Sun hard aspect Moon. Sun hard aspect the other person's Moon, another aspect that can indicate some real lack of understanding, because, you know, the Sun is vibrant, the Sun is your conscious will, the Sun is your ego, and then the Moon is your emotional nature. So when you have one person's ego in conflict with the other person's emotions, you're looking at a situation where the Sun person can be highly overbearing to the Moon person, or either come on very strong, or just be kind of domineering, kind of controlling. I've actually experienced this in synastry, and the other person was very controlling and just really overbearing. He acted like his emotions were always really overpowering. And there were some other things in his chart that spoke to that, but because his Sun was square my Moon, it was very tense, very tense. It felt like he was always trying to overpower me in some way. And that is typical of Sun hard aspect Moon. Moon hard aspect Moon, you're looking at two people whose hearts are different, whose emotional nature is just different. You want different things out of life. The way that you are expressing your emotions is not easily understood by the other person, by the other person's moon. So for instance, one person has their moon in Aries, one person has their moon in Cancer. The person with the moon in Aries is going to be very forthright and very courageous, you could say, at times very emotionally reactive. And then you have the moon in Cancer, which is more concerned with, keeping their emotions private, and can be a bit passive aggressive, very much more inward than moon in Aries. And there's just a conflict that exists there. They want different things out of life. The moon is also like because it's your heart, it also indicates what, your heart's desire is, what makes you emotionally well. So if you're in a long-term relationship and you have moon square moon, you can be going after two different things. The one person's moon desires this kind of thing, and the other person's moon desires this kind of thing, and it can be hard to make those two things work together. So then you have moon hard aspect Mercury, and moon is highly important when it comes to things that create strife or difficulty in a relationship, because one person putting one of their planets in hard aspect to your moon can feel like an emotional assault, like they're always attacking you right in the feels. So moon hard aspect Mercury, the Mercury person can be highly overly logical, and the moon person just wants to express their heart. They just want to express their emotions. They're just trying to come from a vulnerable place. And then Mercury hard aspect the other person's moon can be overly logical. So say moon person just wants to express their feelings. They're trying to be vulnerable with the Mercury person. Mercury's job is to be logical. Mercury's job is to organize. So Mercury is trying to make sense of the moon person's emotions in a logical sense, and it is just not working. They can try to explain to the moon person why they shouldn't be upset, and just the way the Mercury person communicates can be very hurtful to the moon person. There's just a real lack of understanding anytime you see a square, and especially like moon square Mercury. So moon hard aspect Saturn is very rough in synastry. Oh, if you can figure it out, you tell me, because my Mercury is retrograde too. I guess just understand that people are not always going to understand you, and I would guess ask for a lot of feedback to see if you're being understood when you're communicating. That's all I can tell you, because I have a hard time with that myself. Moon hard aspect Saturn is very difficult in synastry, because you are looking at a planet. Okay, you're looking at the moon again, which is the heart, the emotional center. It just wants, and then you're looking at Saturn, which is a restrictive, disciplined influence. So when the moon person is expressing themselves, Saturn just wants them to stop. And I've had this too, and it was where I was Saturn. I felt like the moon person was very overbearing. I felt like they were emotionally dramatic, because my Saturn is an Aquarius, and this person right. I only have 3 people in here now, but anyway, I'll just finish what I was saying. Saturn restricts and is disciplined and is very no-nonsense, and my Saturn is an Aquarius, so my Saturn is a little bit more about the collective, and then this person's moon was in Leo, which is very much about the self and, dramatic emotional expression, and it was in opposition. So this person would be very emotionally expressive and over the top, and I just felt like it was so overbearing, and I didn't know how to handle it as a Saturn person, and sometimes I could be a little rude because and of course he took it as being an assault on his emotions. So I could be a little rude, and I would say, just stop being so emotional, stop being so, dramatic. You need to just calm down. And that didn't go over well. That's kind of the traditional dynamic between Saturn and Moon. It's just not something good to have in hard aspect. You can make anything work, but it's not good to have it in hard aspect because Saturn can just be not understanding of the Moon person's emotions at all. Now, difficult aspects from any of the malefics. The malefics are Mars, Saturn, and Pluto, and honestly, I think of Neptune and Uranus as being malefic planets as well. So any difficult or stressful aspects from any planet to, Saturn, Mars, Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, these can be highly difficult in synastry as well. You're just going to be experiencing a lot of control and transformation, sometimes trauma and upheaval with these Pluto aspects. From Mars aspects, there can be a lot of fighting and tension. Saturn restricts, and that can feel very, very heavy. So, for instance, Venus, Saturn. Saturn might want to have a serious relationship with the Venus person because Saturn is a serious planet, but then in hard aspect, it can feel like Saturn is dampening the Venus person's fun and can be really controlling to the Venus person and stuff like that. So, yeah, any of these malefic planets, Mars, Saturn, Pluto, I think sometimes Neptune and Uranus, these can indicate some really difficult times in synastry. So yeah, that's pretty much all I had to say. It doesn't look like we have like 2 people in here right now. I'll go ahead. I can post this video to my page. Does anybody have questions before I log off? No? Alright. Well, you guys have a good evening. I'll publish this to my page so you can watch later.